And it was a terrible thing that he'd achieved to get to Crufts, and she'd actually managed that. And to think somebody else was there in the ring, parading him round, was very, very hard, because she should have been there.
And it was with some pride that you saw Dylan. But on the other hand, it was a shame it should have been Jan.
But, frustratingly for the family and police, the visit to Crufts offered no new clues.
It was like one door closing, but the trouble is you didn't know where the next door was to open.
3 months into the inquiry, despite the volume of information that had come into the inquiry, the number of people we'd spoken to, we were no further identifying whoever was responsible for killing Janice and Connie.
But all that was about to change. The killer's luck was running out. The vigilance of the Fenland community would give police their biggest breakthrough.
On the days leading up to the discovery of Janice and Connie's bodies, another local couple saw a large saloon car leaving the area of Zeelmeyer, which was their house, along Pingle Road.
This early sighting was useful, but more significantly, there was a second witness statement from a local farmer who'd noticed a strange car parked near Janice and Connie's house on the weekend of the murders.
In an adjacent farm gateway, he saw the vehicle parked, and he memorised the number, and in fact he recorded it when he got home. This car index number was extremely important because it's the first time in the inquiry we had a piece of information that we could act directly upon. And of course the car was so close to the house.
At the time, the two car sightings led nowhere, when initial number plate checks drew a blank, leading police to conclude that the farmer had memorised part of the plate incorrectly. This left them with the daunting task of checking thousands of plates with a similar number. However, 3 months later, the farmer's information would prove crucial, and for D.I. Chapman was the key to cracking the case.
I'm looking into the rear of this lorry with the spray coming up, and I'm aware of some headlights coming towards me. And as I watched the headlights, literally out the corner of my eye, I caught the number plate of an approaching car. It appeared on that split second to bear some resemblance to the number of the car that had been seen in Pingle Road at the time of Janice and Constance's death. The following morning I went into work and my colleague jotted down one or two variations of the number, and he did some police national computer checks on those numbers, and he wrote down a series of registered owners, one of which was a Kevin Cottrell. We did some checks on our own computer database, and we saw Kevin Cottrell actually appeared in that database on two occasions, and this was a real turning point of the inquiry, because Kevin Cottrell had actually been to Janice and Constance's house before as a double glazing salesman, and his name was also in the system because he owned a vehicle that started with the registration number G567. So this was a turning point in a really exciting time. We instructed an officer straight away to drive to Kevin Cottrell's home address to take a witness statement from him and to routinely take his fingerprints. And by lunchtime the following day, we'd identified Kevin Cottrell's thumbprint with the thumbprint found on the hearth by Janice's head. And we were confident then that we'd identified the killer of Constance and Janice. And we immediately dispatched officers to his house to arrest him.
It was a strange experience when we arrived. I remember looking up the driveway and Kevin was just stood there looking down at us. We got out of the car, we walked down the driveway. I introduced myself to him. I asked him to listen to what one of the officers with me was going to say. He was formally placed under arrest, and there was just absolutely no reaction from him. Over the years, I've made many arrests. The more serious the arrest, the more people tend to react to it. When we arrested Cottrell, and he'd just been told that he was under arrest for the murder of 2 women, there was no reaction. There was no reaction at all. He merely asked if he could change his slippers. I remember that after all these years. It was odd then, it's odd now. The gut reaction was that here we had a major suspect, and if he turned out to be the killer, I don't think any of us there would have been surprised.
Kevin Cottrell was brought to King's Lynn police station. 4 days of tough questioning was about to begin.
As we got back, you could almost feel his brain spinning at 100 miles an hour as he was thinking to himself, how have they got to where they are? How have they come here? What did I do wrong? You could almost feel it coming off him. He was very tense. It was a very tense moment.
4 months after the murders of Janice and Constance Sheridan, their family were informed of the arrest of Kevin Cottrell.
You're just so relieved when you get news like that. It is just such a relief. You've been pent up for such a long time.
I thought, great, they've got this bastard that killed Jan and Connie, and he's going to be punished now.
For the first time in the investigation, police had a major suspect in custody, and they began to build a picture of the type of person they were dealing with. Kevin Cottrell was a local man and had grown up in the small village of Pentney, where he still lived with his father. Cottrell did have a previous criminal conviction back in 1983 when he was a teenager. But unfortunately at the time, juveniles' fingerprints were not kept on record.
In the early 80s, he was aware that somebody in the village was away on holiday, the house was unoccupied, and he broke into the house and he masturbated on the bedding and the underwear of the girl who lived there.
For the last 2 years, he'd been working as a door-to-door salesman, latterly for a window company.
In general, the profile fitted Kevin Cottrell really rather well. And it comes as no surprise that Cottrell chose the job he did, which means going from place to place, sharking for potential victims who would fit the criteria to use as vehicles for his fantasies.
To his friends, on the face of it, he was a very smartly dressed, very successful businessman. But the reality was he had no money, he couldn't hold a job down, and I think the bottom line, Kevin Cottrell was one of life's losers.
After the arrest, police and forensics teams moved in on Cottrell's home, eager to see if it held any secrets.
We conducted a search and we found some key evidence. We found a bag which appeared to have blood on it. We found a pair of boots and we found a penknife, and these were all submitted for forensic examination.
As soon as we realised there was blood on the bag, then it was whisked off to the forensic laboratory so that we could analyse the blood on it and find out where the blood had come from.
Would this blood prove to be Janice's or Connie's? The police would have an anxious wait for the vital forensic evidence. Now that he was in custody, police had only 4 days to legally detain Cottrell. Would he crack under the pressure of police questioning?
The advice I gave the police was that the perpetrator in interview would be charming, pseudo-charming, would be initially at any rate helpful, would be someone who was concerned and playing all the right cards.
He was very laid back, he was very helpful. How can I help you, officer? I have to get home to get my dad's tea on. It was all a matter of very laid back.
The nature of the commission of the crime was so well planned, so carefully unfolded, and so calmly enacted that the offender thought that there had been nothing to connect him sufficiently closely to the mother and daughter, and therefore he thought that he'd got away with it.
After 2 days of intensive questioning, Cottrell was still denying ever having been to the house. With no news yet from forensics about the blood,